Salisbury House in Des Moines, Iowa, is a Tudor, Gothic, and Carolean-style manor home. It was modeled after the King's House in Salisbury, England, which the couple saw during a visit in 1921. The King's House was a 15th century manor home, which British royalty visited and stayed in. Some of the home's materials were imported, including sections of the roof tile from Lord Nelson's Trafalgar estate in England. Both the properties have some sense of similarities in their architectural style and spatial programming. Since the start of the new millennium, Salisbury House has undergone extensive restoration work. A careful restoration of the exterior envelope of the building was completed in 2002. Then, in 2005, the Salisbury House Foundation was engaged in a capital campaign to raise funds for the interior restoration of the house, with the intent that the property could act as a public museum with national prominence. The offices of Herbert Louis Cruz Blanc, now known as KBA Architecture, was brought on early in the process, and the interior restoration began in May of 2005. It included replacement and installation of security systems, electrical, plumbing, HVAC, and fire detection, as well as suspension systems, while restoration of interior spaces and finishes was planned to be done at a later phase. At this point, alterations to comply with the American Disabilities Act were done as well. Both the properties have gone through similar steps of transformation. They were created to be used as residences, then converted into educational organizations and institutions, or training schools. Next, they were restored and finally were converted into museums and gardens, so as to educate people about their rich history and give them a place to come together for both public and private events. The King's House is one of the oldest buildings in Salisbury. Its construction began in the 13th century and was used as the prebendal residence of the abbot of Sherborne. After the dissolution of the monasteries, the house was passed on to Thomas Sadler, who was the registrar to the bishops of Salisbury. The house gained its royal designation after Sadler played host to King James I. It was heavily remodeled in the 16th and the 17th centuries to achieve its rather interesting style of medieval and Jacobean styles mixed together. In 1852, it was converted into a teacher training college, which is also mentioned in Thomas Hardy's famous novel, Jude the Obscure. Both the buildings have close similarities in the ornamentation details, interior furniture, as well as the woodwork and flooring. The Salisbury House in Des Moines imitates the exterior facade and window frame patterns of the King's House. To achieve this, the architects made use of red bricks, limestone, and the decorative infill with similar, smaller cut flint stones. Here is a quote that aptly captures the true essence of this building. Here is the old woodwork from the Elizabethan times, not reproduced but bodily removed and re-erected, precisely as it has stood for the last 400 to 600 years in Old England. The visitor looks not on at an American interpretation of the architecture of the old days, but stands in the actual presence of it. This description of the Salisbury House was published in The Old and the New, Des Moines Tribune, Capital 27. More than a dozen measured drawings, dating from 1923, of the King's House in Salisbury survive in the Salisbury House archives. An elaborate set of documented photographs of the King's House, as well as other historic buildings of importance in Salisbury, were acquired by the Weeks. These drawings and images helped the architects in creating the most accurate and authentic replication of specific elements of the King's House as desired by Mr. Weeks.